Now, getting back to the documents from the Douglas study, you mentioned to me something that I really wasn't aware of, and this was the thing with the Hughes aircraft was also working on programs at the same time, correct?
Okay. This is going to require some explanation. Okay, and let me apologize first of all in terms of how I characterized it. I want to clarify everything about that. Okay, so if you look at one of the documents, one of the Douglas documents, it mentions concurrent programs. And it mentions like a 10-man study headed by Meyer over at Hughes Aircraft. Okay. And so I knew about this, and you know, the literature had mentioned this about study over at Hughes. Okay, so what happened basically about a year ago was I got a hold of this. Okay, now this is this thing that was put out by this place down Southern California. They put out these compendiums of photocopied material.
Okay.
And let's see, basically this is volume 2 of this background information on anti-gravity technology. Now there's an interesting one, role of gravitation in physics. This is like, this is a document from like Wright-Patterson, and then there are a couple others, but the majority of this are Hughes aircraft papers. Okay.
Is this available on to buy, or where did you get this from?
I bought this at a used bookstore. This used to be available at this place called Atlantis Books down in Pasadena.
Okay.
I don't know where it's available now. I mean, this is, you know, this is basically obsolete technology now for distributing information. So
and what's the title of it again?
I don't know where you,
give me,
well, you can see it. Background information on anti-gravity technology.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right.
And who published that? Okay, who is the author of that? Who published that? Well,
it's compiled and published by Ted Antone. Teddantone. This was put out in '94, apparently. Okay, so let me explain this stuff first of all. The majority of this material are the papers of this guy named Robert L. Forward, who basically, he worked at Hughes for a long time, and then he became a science fiction writer because supposedly science fiction authors kept asking him for basically to be a consultant on technical details with respect to the stories they were writing. So in any case, he was involved with Hughes in what I would characterize as gravitational research. Now, to be clear, most of this stuff doesn't relate to anti-gravity. The majority of this material relates to basically detection of gravitational field. And at this time, this was of practical use for the programs involving, say, the lunar orbiter, and then also space probes that would be going near asteroids and stuff. Having a detector that could be used to detect the exact field, you know, what the gravitational intensity was, and adjust for it is, immediately practically important. However, there's still a couple of interesting papers that Forward did. One of them is titled, let's see, he did this in 1962. It's called Guidelines to Anti-Gravity. And this was published at the time in the Journal of Applied Physics. I mentioned that more than half of this stuff is on the public record. Okay. Yeah, a number of these were basically published in the technical journals at the time. One thing that wasn't, and that's interesting, is the stuff at the beginning. The stuff at the beginning that was, that's part of basically of the work that was done at Hughes, basically didn't involve Robert Forward. And this is basically, they did a study in, let's see, in 1958, like late 1958 and early 1959, to attempt to determine the speed of gravity. Okay. And if you look at there are 3 memos associated with this, and basically they were interested in the possibility that the speed of gravity exceeded the speed of light. Okay, which is kind of the first stage that you go to in terms of, you know, if you're interested in, you know, say using gravity as a propulsion system.
Wow.
So, well, yeah, that's like this. Okay, this is one of the memos.
Okay.
Okay. And let's see, it says, yeah, as far as the person who wrote this memo, my ultimate goal in doing this research was and is to try to measure or calculate the speed of gravitational interaction. Now he's talking about, he calls it V sub g. Now that's the speed of gravity itself. It should be noted that this task is orders of magnitude more difficult than to measure the speed of light due to the three reasons. Granted, gravity cannot be shut off. Gravitational fields are ordinarily very weak. The speed of gravitational interaction, V sub g, may be greater than the speed of light or even infinite. Okay. And so that was their, you know, for this, at least this thing in 58 and 59, they were interested in that. Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Now this isn't, I would say, okay, this is like 35 pages. This isn't on the public record. This hasn't been published. A lot of this other stuff that involved Robert Forward, though, has been.
Wow. So those are the two programs. Are you aware of any other companies that were working on this stuff?
Well, I would look at that, you know, that article that Kehoe did in '65? I mean, he mentions a couple. Actually, let me take a look at something.
Okay.
You know, you're asking that question. There was a lot of activity in the mid to late '60s. Not, let me see, just a minute. Come on.
You're an absolute wealth of knowledge. I'm really impressed.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. Let me see. I've researched a lot of things. You know, there are a lot of aspects of this that are of interest. Let me see.
Is your background related to what you're doing here, or what's your work background?
Well, I was trained as a computer engineer, and I work, you know, on applications and that sort of thing. But as a computer engineer, I was also trained in electrical engineering. So I have the, you know, basically the technical physics background. Okay. For basically to appreciate some of this stuff, I guess. Yeah. Okay, so let me see. Basically, you can look in certain articles as far as concurrent programs that were going on in industry, but as far as private type of things that were being done by individuals, there were a lot of things that were going on that at the same time. There was something called the Space Drive Research Society that was being run by James Cox up in Sacramento. Now, these what I'm describing here are not like necessarily connected to any businesses or programs that corporations were running, but these were ones that you know, individuals were just running on their own. Space Flight Research Labs, 1966 through, there was a guy named Bob Jones in Clark, New Jersey. This place down in Manhattan Beach / Los Angeles, California, put out this publication called Anti-Gravity Research at that time. Let's see. There were a few basically groups of people who are working on things. I posted on, you know, and at the same time I posted on, let's see, my Pinterest site, these blueprints of this other group of people. Now, this is kind of edge case, somewhere between speculative engineering and what I would call fandom. You know, well, no, fandom, yeah. These blueprints for this flying saucer that they were working on, you know, basically these, you know, these people were directly influenced by like Star Trek and Lost in Space, which was basically, you know, currently in first run syndication at the time.
Wow.
You know, there was a lot of activity at that time.
Wow. We may have to try to put these documents back up again. I have bring them into America and put them on a site where people can access them. You haven't posted these documents, right?
No. I went I went searching for them yesterday, and they are currently up. They're up on, what is it, Reddit, and then there's another place, somebody's got a WordPress site up, and he's got the PDF that includes all of the stuff that I had posted.
Okay.
Okay, you can find it up. I think it's on Reddit, or no, not Reddit, but what's that that big, not Reddit, but what's the big site for publishing digitized versions of books?
Oh, I'm not sure. No, I'm not sure. Well, we can probably,
there's one big one, and I forget what the name of it is right now, but it's up there. I don't think it's up on, unfortunately, it's not up on like the Internet Archive for free, but there is another place, a WordPress site that has the PDF up where you can find the documents.
Wow. So that's dealing with that, and then you started to talk about this metal. That's when I saw on your site, and Dave alerted me to the fact that you have this video of metals. Can you talk a little bit about where you got that video?
Oh, well, actually, that's different than the metal. Let me clarify that. That is different. I found that up on that, you know, I search around for stuff, okay? There is basically a place that offers, you know, I was most recently looking for footage, okay? I was looking for footage. And so there was basically a website, I mean, it's basically on the video that basically sells like footage that was for parts of newsreels and that sort of thing. You can find all sorts of footage. But I found this one that is, you know, referential to UFOs, and it was taken down in Jacksonville, Florida. Looking at the naming convention of the file that I downloaded, it seems to have been like May, June 1960 is when this footage was taken. It's silent, and there's no information with it, but it shows basically what looks like some damage to a building, and this guy who has a box with a piece of metal in it.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's interesting. I posted it up. I mean, I posted stuff up on Pinterest so that, you know, people can find it and they can do research, because I wasn't able to get any more information on this. I tried calling up the Jacksonville Police Department and come up with any information, because it shows the guy standing in front of the Jacksonville Department of Justice or whatever, and I couldn't get any information. So.
Yeah.
I don't know anything beyond. I tried looking for things that may have happened around the same time. I found a couple of things, but you know, there's nothing that's specific to this, unfortunately.
Yeah,
go
ahead.
No, that's different than the metals that I have. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, but it's you found something that I think is linked in, because it's if you study some of the metals that have been found, it almost looks exactly the same. There was a couple in Ohio that were found like that, where they sort of fell out of the sky and they looked like they'd been melted and then sort of solidified.
Yeah.
And so I found that very unique that you would you found that piece of evidence, and I'm going to track it down. I only saw it maybe a couple of days ago on your site there, and I was like, wow, this is significant, because it looks the same as the others. So let's talk about the metals that you have in terms of your stuff.
Sure. Okay. So around the time that I contacted you, basically, you know, when I was buying stuff off of eBay, they began having auctions that involved sales of material. One of these auctions was in June of 2004, around the same time that the Douglas stuff came by, and this was for material that supposedly came from South Haven Park. Let me see. Where's the? See, where's the auction listing? Let's see. Here's the auction listing. Okay, so that's the auction listing. See, it was around the same time.
Okay.
And you can see the, you can see the main rock right there. It was for two rocks. One of them was a bigger one. One of them was a smaller one. And basically, let me see. This is the bigger one. And I received that, and let's see, the person who sold it to me, basically, this is, the auction says, on Thanksgiving 1992 in South Haven Park in Shirley, Long Island, New York, reportedly a UFO crashed there, and the park was closed for 3 days. I went there with my metal detector last year and found two strange rocks at the alleged crash site. I am offering them for sale because I took them out of my garage and brought them into my house, and then all three of my computers crashed. One blew out a power supply, one lost the motherboard, and the other lost the hard drive. If someone has the ability to analyze them or just wants to experiment with them, go ahead. I cannot guarantee that they will give you the same effects they did here. But hey, that's why I'm not asking for a lot for them, and no reserve as far as the starting price and all that. So, yeah, there was this, and let's see, no, let me just take it out. Basically, see, this is, it's slightly different than it was before. Oh, there's all the fragments. Yeah, I'll describe it. Okay, so this is what it looks like right now. You'll notice this stuff. This wasn't like that before. This was all just solid. This is metal on the surface of the rock right there. Okay. I went out, basically I had it analyzed at a laboratory down in Santa Clara. Then I took it over to the materials department at Cal State, San Jose State University. And let's see, then after that, basically, I accidentally dropped it, and it fell about, I don't know, between 6 inches and a foot onto a hardwood surface. And this part of it basically shattered, which was interesting. It seemed like it was, it was pretty hard on there, pretty solid. But just like from that fall, it actually shattered into some pieces. Or the surface, this is the surface metal coating. Okay, so what I did, as I mentioned, was I had it analyzed at a lab, and let's see, they cut off a sample at that time. Let me go to that part of the report. Basically, they removed a sample of that coating at the time, and they did an analysis of it. Let's see, iron and manganese coating pieces of titanium. Circumstances in which the coating of the rock was created is described as cataclysmic, like a volcanic eruption. The melting point of manganese is 1200 degrees centigrade, iron 1500 degrees centigrade. Okay, now this is the, let's see, I think this is the right one. Yeah, this is the spectrographic analysis of what the coating is.
Oh,
Yeah, I can see that.
okay.
Okay, so as you can see, the main spike is iron, the one next to it is manganese, and then there's that off to the side, there's silicon, aluminum, and that sort of thing. Okay. So, okay, I took it to the, the materials department over at San Jose State. Met with a guy named, well, actually, the Department of Geology. And this guy over there, basically, I had a section cut off, and so that they could basically look at it under basically a microscope. That was back in November of 2010. And he was able to determine the rock of it is principally composed of iron oxide. It is non-meteoric in origin. It is not a manganese nodule because of the large number of crystal particles throughout the rock. It is of non-volcanic origin due to the nature and shapes of the crystals throughout. His best guess at what formed it is either it's some sort of shallow water siltstone that had all the iron leached out of the surface, leaving a high concentration of manganese, or it was coated somehow. It could not be desert varnish because of the thickness of the coating. So those were that was what he came to as far as this material.
Wow, interesting. So those
yeah, sorry. I was just going to say, I looked, my own research. I wasn't able to find anything with a similar composition, except basically I have this thing called the REAP Bulletin, and it includes a report on something called the Vashka object. And this is a fragment from like behind the Iron Curtain. This is supposedly something that happened or something that was retrieved in '73, and the composition of that was iron and manganese. That was the only thing I was going to say.
Did you ever get contacted by the Jacques Vallée or the ATIP people about what you've got?
No. Well, I don't know what to do with this. That's why I contacted, your friend. This organization that he's involved with sounded like, this basically was formed recently down in the South Bay, and it sounded like they might be the kind of person who might be able to do something with this. So I contacted them.
Yeah, there's a number of people looking at this kind of stuff. And then you had a piece of metal. You had the thing with the Kecksburg. Can you tell me that story?
Yes, sir. That happened about the same time that I was in touch with you. Also, I think I don't know if I mentioned it to you or not. Okay, so, but anyway, yeah. If you can see that,
wow.
This is a piece of. Basically, that's part of the iron boxcar that the object was in, and then there's a little coating there of whatever dripped out of the object, and then next to it is just a piece of the actual whatever the dripping is itself. Now, I went out and I had this analyzed at the time.
How did you obtain it first? How does the story come about?
Yeah, sorry.
And stuff.
Yeah, okay. So here, just let me get this out. Okay, so that also, again, this is another, let's see. This is also, again, it's another eBay purchase. Okay, so this was around the end of 2004. And this one, yeah, well, $47.26, Anyway, this one basically, okay, so I got in touch with the guy who sold it to me, and he told me some things about where he got it from. Supposedly, he was in contact with some guy who he met at community college, and he told them, this person told him that he had been part of a recovery team. And
where's this college? Can you tell me where the college is, or where this guy lived, or whatever?
Yeah, I can tell you the state. It was in Kentucky.
Okay.
Okay, so basically, he met this guy and he told him about being on a recovery team. Okay, and they went to this motel and they were there before whatever it was went down. Okay, they were expecting it. Okay, they knew something was going to come down. Okay, then they went out and they went into the woods. They found the object. They managed to get it up on the back of the flatbed truck and took it out. Now, again, this is what the person told me. Okay, so they took it into, I think it was into Pittsburgh, downtown. They took it to the, they took it down to the industrial section where the railroads were. They put it on the back of a flatbed truck, and they took it by train down into the Southwest. That was what I was told. That's what basically this guy wrote to me saying. And during that time that it was on the flatbed truck, something inside began heating up, okay? And so they went in there and they got the hatch off of it, and basically the inside was, you know, molten. Part of it was molten because of the heat. And some part of the lining, this would be the lining, dripped out onto the floor of the boxcar. And those are basically, supposedly, those drippings are supposedly these fragments.
Okay.
Okay. So basically, I went out and I had a spectrographic analysis done of that, and it turns out that it was part, you know, copper, part tin. The constituency was basically brass. Okay, which is a relatively soft, heavy metal, which isn't necessarily something that you'd consider making anything out of, which is surprising. And so after that, what I tried to do is figure out, well, maybe the alloy, you know, the trace ingredients and that sort of thing can tell me something about where it came from. And this isn't one of the elements listed, but when he was doing the spectrographic analysis and looking at it, he typed this up. This report was typed up based upon the readout that was given by the machine that he was using to analyze the piece. Basically, when he was doing the analysis, he mentioned briefly arsenic. Okay. Now, I thought that was interesting because when I went on the Kubrick Institute website and searched, when I was looking at the basically the different alloys that are produced around the world, I know that like in Poland and Russia, a couple of those alloys they use arsenic in the brass that they produce, and so I thought that might give an indication as to the origin of this. So I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting, and that's the pieces you've got. Do you have 2 or 3, or how many pieces do you have?
2. One is just the dripping. The other is a bit of the dripping, and it's on a piece of iron that was supposedly part of the boxcar that the whatever the object was in.
Okay, and you didn't stay in touch with this guy, or you know, to try to validate what he's telling you in terms of the recovery team, that sort of thing.
Well, as far as trying to validate it, I try and keep appraised of the literature, but there hasn't been anything that's come up that I can really see to validate it with. You know, he talked to me about the recovery team that was mentioned to him that this individual is in contact with, is supposedly involved with, but it's very difficult to validate that. But the story certainly sounded substantial. It didn't sound like he was lying to me.
Wow. So let me ask you, sort of in closing, like, what do you think is, you've done a lot of research, 30 years research. What do you think's going on? What's your sort of analysis of the overall UFO situation, and where do you think we should be going in terms of research, in terms of trying to figure this thing out?
Well, those are interesting questions. I can tell you I've done quite a bit of research. I mean, you know, I haven't published anything, but I've been working on books, and I've researched on many different parts. I tend to be, you know, try and be down to earth, but yeah, I've also researched such things as my initial, you know, when I started, around the time I initially spoke with you, I may have still been of the mind that this was part of purely terrestrial development, that this was the result of secret weapons projects. But since that time, you know, I've moved more towards the extraterrestrialist belief. I will give you just a few of my conclusions. Basically, I do believe that there are off-world groups. Okay, there are countries on other planets. Okay, I would characterize it that way, to put it in terrestrial terms.
Yeah.
Okay, my conclusion, or how these people got to other planets, is that at some point way back in the past, this planet was visited by a genuine extraterrestrial species during, say, one of our ice ages. They may have observed a sample of our species and dug them out of some cave up in Europe and taken them with them for study. And after they were through studying, they basically put them down someplace else and maybe gave them a head start. Okay, and ever since that time, things have gotten very complicated. Okay, as far as what's been going on up there in relation to what's been going on down here. Okay, and part of what we're studying seems to be basically the history that's been going and the consequence of what's been going on up there. And since then, they seem to have basically migrated to different star systems and have been returning home on certain occasions. And this has been complicating things greatly in terms of our understanding of what the hell is going on. And it's very difficult to try and figure and understand what's going on when you can see clear evidence of basically our genetic origin right here on Earth, but then figuring out why the heck are all these, these different other sets of people, coming to this planet with higher technology than ours. Did they start elsewhere? Well, we know that we started here. I would say that we were basically a form of panspermia occurred, in which another species came here and then basically took part of us and distributed part of us.
Okay. In terms of government, you did a lot of work on, trying to recover what the government knows or what companies know. Where do you think we are, say, in terms of industry or in terms of government? Have we figured out anything, or have we got this all figured out, or where do you stand on that?
Well, we know certain things. I mean, I think Richard Dolan's recent research as far as the information about the briefings that were done in 1997 is very important.
Yeah.
We have an idea that basically the work that's being done now is being done with the private companies and not with agencies in government. It's basically isolated in individual programs in the big companies like Lockheed was specifically mentioned, but then also Northrop and probably Douglas / Boeing now. And unfortunately, these are isolated, and because they're private, there's no access and there's no accountability. That's it.
Yeah.
And of course, getting documents from them, fat chance.
Well, you did get some. You actually got some out of it.
Well, yeah, but this program wasn't it wasn't the most successful either. I mean, they weren't even looking to produce a craft, unfortunately,
And the last question, what are you working on right now? Because I may want to do another interview. I'm really fascinated. I looked at your site and I was just like, wow. I mean, it's just like this guy was under the radar all these years. I didn't know who he was. You've got some really interesting stuff. So what are you working on right now?
Well, I mean, I mentioned, I'm constantly adding things to my, the information I compile from my books and that sort of thing. When I'm, specific things, the most recent thing was I, decided to, contact this organization down in the South Bay about the metals that I'd done before. As far as investigating specific things, most recently I've been, compiling information about the GOC, the Ground Observer Corps, and their involvement, with investigating the UFO phenomenon. I have a couple of documents posted up on the Pinterest thing there that I got from basically somebody who was involved with the Filter Center out in Des Moines, where, of course, back in 53, 54, where, of course, nothing was going on at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I consider the GOC to be the sort of the mother of all UFO organizations. Not not that everybody saw stuff, and not that that was the main focus. It wasn't. I mean, the people I talked to, was that their main focus? No. But if you look at the volume of information that was generated and was collected by them, there's a tremendous amount of case material that came out of the GOC.
Wow. And your books, what's the status on your books? Are you going to publish stuff?
Eventually, when it gets finished, hopefully if I finish before, I have to leave this world. But, I mean, it's an ongoing thing. There's significant projects, though,
There may have to be a recovery operation on your material if you happen to leave the world. I mean, it's like you seem to have a lot of material.
Yeah, I know. Well, I've been collecting and researching just like you have. I mean, I'm sure you have an equal amount.
Yeah, I've got some stuff too. It was an actual pleasure to talk to you. I'm going to go through your website again. I may have some more questions for you and you're stationed in California, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, because I may be in California. I may want to touch base with you, but it's been an honor and fascinating. I mean, that I was put together with you again. It's like a weird synchronicity, but I'm honored to have talked to you, and thank you for the story that I've been telling for many years about these documents. And there's even I may contact you individually. History Channel is looking at doing something on documents, so they may be interested in following up on this thing. They're going to do some shows on government documents.
That's fine, yeah. Well, I appreciate having the opportunity to talk to you again. Sorry I haven't been out of touch for so long, but I try and work. Basically, I've intentionally been, doing my, work on my own, individually.
Yeah. Okay, we'll be in touch. And once again, thank you for spending this time with me and giving me a good education on what you've been up to.
Well, sure, and yeah, I appreciate your work as well. You've done some really great work.
Beautiful. Okay.
If there's something of interest, what I will do is I will write it down, and then I'll start writing references to it. Okay, where I find information for it, and sometimes you'll find things that are important. Like you'll find where something of interest basically converges, or you find out something interesting when you're reading through associating one fact with another. And it's important to make sure to record that stuff, rather than just forgetting about it. That's what I try and record a lot of these things, so that at some point I can put out a reference work that might be of assistance to people that are researching these sorts of things.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's not that many people actually researching it. A lot of people are following the stories, but in terms of actually citing stuff and going through material, there's not many. Like even the Stanton Friedman material, it's probably maybe the biggest collection in the world. I'm the only person that's ever been there, because a lot of people, they're busy with their life. They haven't got time to go and
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, no, none of us do. Absolutely. Yeah. Or I mean, few of us have any kind of collections. I mean, I have a pretty big collection, so which I go through, and some of that stuff isn't necessarily available digitally. And not that many people have this volume of material that they can just go through and basically assemble information. Yeah, that's right.
Your metal stuff, is that online? Your analysis of your metal pieces?
No. That's why I contacted this guy. That's why I contacted your friend, was because I mean, I didn't know where to go to with this sort of thing, and this organization that he's a part of sounded like, he mentioned that he was interested in the metals particularly. So if they want to do something about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, and Jacques Vallée will probably contact you once he hears about this, because you've got some people because they're working on a number of different pieces, and he's at Silicon Valley, so he's got all the latest tech material and machines and stuff, that leading edge material where they can do analysis. And he said all he needs is like a pinhead full of material. He doesn't need the whole thing or whatever. So I'm sure.
Well, no. Yeah, I've got enough material. Yes, sir. Well, that's interesting. I mean, I read. Okay, so I have the book Confrontations. Yes, I do know about his interest, but I didn't know he was still working on that stuff.
Oh yeah.
I mean, well, he published his books, you know, in the early '90s, but I didn't know he was still actively working on
Oh yeah.
doing.
He's actually just published 4 new volumes for Forbidden Science, and I would advise if you get it, volume 3 and volume 4. It's unbelievable when you see what he's been up to, and he's basically been called in because he's worked on metals for 50 years. Like now you've got To the Stars and all these people are working on metals, and he said this is nothing new. We've been doing this forever, and we've got the highest tech stuff. And he contacted me about the Canadian materials. The Canadians had some material, so he contacted me. So I'm sure once he hears about this, you'll probably hear from him, and you can make your whatever, you know, whatever your conditions are. I think he'll follow them, and he will give you the analysis of what he finds out.
Well, that's fine. Yeah, as long as you know, I can certainly donate fragments. Certainly, like some of the fragments that broke off of this thing, you know. And then, you know, if he wanted, as far as like, you know, this, I'm willing to donate, you know, this one to someone. The one that's just got like the iron piece that has the part of it being that material that dripped off the object. You know,
Yeah, that's an interesting story because I did do the Kecksburg story, so I'm familiar with that story. I mean, that's why it was probably the main reason why I wanted to contact you was when I heard the Kecksburg word, I went, wow. I mean, I worked on that story.
Well, okay, so have you heard, the thing that interested me about this guy's story was the recovery team. I found that very interesting. Of course, I know about moon dust, okay?
Yeah.
It sounded very much like moon dust, okay, the recovery operation that this guy was a part of. And you know, basically the details sounded perfectly reasonable to me.
Yeah, and one of the things that we had, I don't know if you followed my research, but we chased around Dr. Eric Walker at Penn State University, who was only 100 miles away, had a pilot's license. And at one point in the early 90s, we interview him and we say, because there was a report from Kecksburg of people in trench coats, like civilians there. So we contacted him and we said, were you at Kecksburg? And he went, yeah, I was there, so what? And so he confirmed that he had been at the site. And it was sort of like when we tried to get to him, he basically said it was like I need to know thing. I went in, I did my job, I left, and I've got better things to do. And it's sort of like, so that's what it appeared to me, that they knew something was coming down. They had the top people there. They pulled the thing. They did whatever, almost like they have an operation to do it wherever it comes down. And it all happens off the record. And the people will come in for 1 or 2 days, go back to their regular life. And that's all they really know about their involvement in it.
Well, okay, so now with respect to that, that's the thing. The guy mentioned he went out to basically they went out to a motel room and they were basically monitoring things, okay? Now this was before the Kecksburg object came down, okay? They were in standby, and then when it came down, then they moved out, okay? So this is the thing that makes you think that it was something like, say, Iron Curtain, okay? And plus basically the alloy, the nature of the alloy, that's what makes me draw that conclusion, is they knew it was coming down. They were monitoring whatever was happening before it came down.
Yeah, it's an interesting scenario. The only thing that really that is different from your story is the story that they were telling about Kecksburg was that it had gone to Wright-Patterson, and your guy said it went to the southwest or something, correct?
Well, right. But as far as the information that Stan Gordon has, the source that he has that says that he saw it in Wright-Patterson is not a reliable, what I'd consider a reliable source.
Okay.
He's changed his basically what he said in the past, and the details that he's given, I would not characterize as particularly believable.
That's fair enough. Beautiful. Okay, we'll leave it at that. And I appreciate it, and I'm gonna check your website because I've only came across you in the last couple of days, and I decided I simply have to talk to you. So again, I appreciate all the work you've done, and it's been an honor to finally talk to you face to face.
Well, it's nice to talk to you face to face also. Although I will admit, even if you don't recognize me, I did see you at a conference a few years back.
Okay, yeah. See, I completely forgotten the story. I just remembered when he mentioned your name. I remember you just used your first name when you talked to me the first time. You didn't give me your last
Yeah,
name.
yeah,
And that's where I was
that's
kind
right.
of like figured like this has got to be a government agent or something. Somebody's going to try to pull one
No,
on me.
no,
It was
not exactly. No.
anyway. Okay, we'll leave it at that, and I'll be in touch, and we'll probably do some work together because I'm really interested in what you're doing. I saw some of the stuff you put up, but I want to look at the rest of it. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Please do. That's what it's there for, and particularly the photographs. Okay, those photographs that I've scanned in are up there because, I don't have any information on them, except for, basically where I got them from.
yeah.
I don't know anything about those cases. If anybody can get information about those so that we could, do more investigation on where those came from, it would be, very helpful.
One question I do have, you had the video that you got from Jacksonville. Is that on YouTube where I can download it, or do you have a copy that we can put into this video?
Um, well, okay, so you can't download it from Pinterest?
I don't know how to do it. I only know how to do it from YouTube. If it was on YouTube, I could do it, the file.
Oh gosh. Okay, well what I can do is I can upload it. I mean, I think I can upload it and then make it unlisted, and then I'll send you the link to it. How
Okay,
about that?
beautiful.
I mean, I don't know. Okay, it is, this organization or this company has licensed it, so I can't rightfully, just put it on public display, but I can unlist it and, put it unlisted so that you can download it from there. I'll make a note of doing that, okay?
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, because that was a very interesting video, especially like now people are talking about metals, but when that video was made, I mean, nobody was talking about metals. I mean, and it looks exactly like the stuff that I've seen from Ohio and stuff like that. And we did recover one, my assistant Desta and I recovered one from University of Arizona when we were looking at James McDonald's files. Very interesting piece, 1939, came flying out of the sky and dug itself. It was like a spike. And again, it was made out of 99% nickel with a copper core in the middle of this thing, and was analyzed by the top nickel people in the country, and basically very anomalous. And so there's a lot of this stuff, and it's most important to get that material that is not in the public domain. It's stuff that nobody ever considered to be alien metal. When you start looking at it, you go like, oh, this is the same stuff that everybody's talking about now, and yet nobody was publicizing it at that time. It's like not like someone said it came from a UFO.
Well, yeah, I mean, you talk about that. I have a photograph from 1955 that was talked about in an article at that time that was published in Jessup's UFO Annual that talks about this fragment of metal that came out of the sky, and these kids are standing around it. And, obviously it's a piece of metal. It's not a meteor. And that's been happening. Yes,
And
I mean,
where's is that on your site as well? That piece, that photograph?
I have not scanned it in.
Oh, okay.
No, it is not current. It is not currently there. I collect photographs. You're talking about stuff. I've been collecting photographs also. Yes,
Wow.
and it's one of the photographs that I have that's of this thing that's mentioned in Jessup's book. He mentions what happened in as one of the newspaper clippings that he was basically
Wow.
has in there.
You're an absolute wealth of information. I'm really impressed. I mean, you've got some good stuff.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Louis. I will talk to you, and we'll be in touch. And I'll probably have more questions for you. And I appreciate your time. Thanks, because I know you're not a public guy, but it's really means a lot to me to help sort of get this out.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm happy to. It isn't my intention to just sit on it. I try and get the information out there where it can be best exposed. Really.
Yeah. Okay, I'll help you share it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.